I'm the happy moderator of this session number 5, which is about the role of innovative regions and networks in the Innovation Union. Happy moderator of what looks a dream team, so we will keep to the order which is fixed. The first speaker is Richard Tuffs. Richard is the director of the ERRIN network. He will tell you what ERRIN means. Many people working in Brussels know. His title is about Towards a Stronger Regional Dimension in Horizon 2020. Next will be Reza Zadeh. Reza Zadeh will speak about the role of regions in the future European research on innovation. He has different caps as many other speakers, but he is expected to speak a little bit more about the clusters perspective, and he will speak in particular as an executive director of the Foundation Clusters on Competitiveness. And then Claire will follow. Claire Nauwelaers will speak about the challenges for open borders, regional innovation policies. She has a large background in the OECD. She also knows about the smart specialization process. She's involved in the Mirror Group. So that will help us to get a more global perspective. And with that, we will be prepared to listen to Daria Golebowska, who belongs to the executive board of the European Institute of Poland, Institute of Technology, in Budapest, but with a Polish name. So she will speak about the contribution of knowledge institutions, what we can get out of the KICs, and in particular from a regional perspective. And we will finish with Cédric Virsiglio. Cédric is the director of the Alsace Bureau Office in Brussels, but he will not speak only about Alsace. And the Polish organizers thought that it would be good to end with a good example of cross-border cooperation in the field of research on innovation. What is happening in the Upper Rhine metropolitan region, so connecting the French region of Alsace with Switzerland and Germany. And with that, we will open the debate with you. So the speakers are expected to speak not more than 10 minutes. And I'm happy also to be near Zoltan Balogh, who will be our rapporteur, who was heavily involved in the preparation and the implementation of the Warrior 2 conference. So we are in good hands to have an active debate about innovation, innovative regions, innovative networks in the Innovation Union. So many words about innovation or innovative, but let's get started. And so I give the floor to Richard for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank the organizers of WIRE 2012 for the invitation for ERRIN. This is our third WIRE conference. I'm just trying to work. Yes, here we are. Whoop. So just a quick introduction to ERRIN, about ERRIN. ERRIN basically is a Brussels-based platform of regions. We are there to strengthen regional research and innovation capacities, and we do that in a fairly typical networking manner of project development, policy shaping, and profile raising. And basically, we're there to help regions get their voice heard in Brussels, and we support the implementation of Europe 2020 strategy, Innovation Union, and also smart specialization. And in fact, we're on the Mirror group of the smart specialization platform. The four sort of key messages that I want to bring over in 20 minutes, or 10 minutes, sorry, that's a lapsus. Regions basically need to be more involved in Horizon 2020. We heard that just recently, that's just the last session from Lambert van Nistelrooy. The territorial dimension of research and innovation should be supported by both structural funds and Horizon 2020 via the Stairway to Excellence approach. Horizon 2020 should also include a similar program to Regions of Knowledge. Now, we're quite keen to keep this regional dimension. It may not be exactly in the same format, but we certainly want programs within Horizon 2020 to encourage regions to work together on strategic planning, including whether you call it the triple or the quadruple helix. And last but not least, we feel that regions should be supported to share their experiences in smart specialization, because that's going to be a key plank of future programming. Just coming back on this role of regions in Horizon 2020, I don't think we need, in this, with you as a target audience, a week of innovating regions, this shouldn't really need to go through the role that regions play in developing innovation ecosystems. Infrastructure, education and training, entrepreneurship, startups, procurement, social innovation, all those terms have already come up today in this conference. But we particularly think that the regional role should be around supporting proximity-driven and place-based research, mobilizing local actors, and working within a strategic dimension such as the smart specialization. And in fact, we have been working some of the time with the Committee of the Regions, and tomorrow you'll hear from Markku Markkula, who was involved in this small committee of the Regions workshop. And it says here, regions in Europe should and can foster a new innovation mindset towards demand and problem-driven innovation, strengthen entrepreneurship, education, and bridging the digital divide. And therefore, we see regions very much in terms of contributing to the three broad Horizon 2020 priorities of excellence, societal challenges, and industrial leadership. And we think that this regional dimension, which can bring in this place-based, partnership-driven role, developing competitiveness and innovative ecosystems, smart specialization, are key, that they need to come together, that without the regional dimension, this is still, the Horizon 2020 could be still a sort of a silo approach. And particularly there on the stairway to excellence, we think the stairway of excellence needs to be supported by both structural funds and Horizon 2020 funding, so that all regions can engage in research and innovation activities. And perhaps the three pictures you've got there on the screen of hopefully, on the left side, or on my left, you've got this rickety wooden staircase, which is, I think if we look at that, the argument is, where are we going? Where are we going on this staircase, and how confident are we on how long it's going to last? The second one, in the middle, is very much looking at a confusion of stairways. And I think there is a danger, and this has already come up today, of looking at, if we don't get this right, there's going to be more confusion on these stairways of excellence than we have at the moment. And of course, the third one is our optimum luxury staircase, moving regions between structural funds, but moving them up into Horizon 2020. And this is very important, that we think that all regions should have the ability to be involved in this staircase and not just be seen as something coming out of cohesion policy. So for us on that case, coming now to regions of knowledge, you may have seen, or we put a few of our proposals around, that we have for the first time brought 4 networks. You've seen one of them today is presenting, you've heard one just earlier, the Assembly of European Regions, Eurocities is here today as well. And basically, all 4 networks are calling really for a revised Regions and Cities of Knowledge program, which will support one of the objectives of the closing the innovation divide. And this program will allow regions and cities to directly engage in Horizon 2020. So we're particularly interested in keeping some form of Regions of Knowledge program into the future Horizon 2020. Basically, why? Because if you can get the external evaluation of regions of knowledge was quite positive. The division really between this capacity building on one side and excellence on the other does not reflect the complexity and holistic nature of innovation. Placing the regions of knowledge concept within a limited territorial cohesion budget will diminish one of the program's acknowledged strengths of bringing the triple and quadruple helix players together. And also, and importantly, that the competitive regions, the ones that are perhaps the more developed regions, are likely to have much less funding under the future structural funds. And any work, any position of putting this sort of regions of knowledge into a transnational or territorial cooperation program is likely to suffer from a much weaker budget over the next period. So by dividing this, but coming back to this point of this differing discourses, by dividing in a way this capacity building on one side and excellence on the other, there is perhaps a danger of separation, not synergy. And we'll be discussing obviously the synergy aspects tomorrow. But if you look interesting, on one hand, the European Commission for the EIT, for example, and the KICs, the knowledge and innovation communities, have actually called for greater partnership. So you see there on one side, you've got the climate kick, which is looking at this education, business, research, moving with public bodies to produce a much stronger innovation landscape. And also on there, you've also got the European Innovation Partnerships for active and healthy aging. And again, you can see the way that it's trying to bring a whole range of players together. So on one side, we've got this discourse, we need more partnership. And on the other, we seem to have a discourse, we need to separate the capacity from the excellence. So I think the key point there here is that regions have a particular role at bringing together the big sort of areas of funding that are going to be in the future program, which is one is on the cohesion and then the Horizon 2020. Now, territorial cooperation obviously is part of cohesion, but it's in that sort of structural fund area. And of course, what is interesting is that the regions don't just look at Horizon 2020 and cohesion, they're also looking at procurement, entrepreneurship, SMEs, education and training, the whole thing about the digital needs, this horizontal level of digital, stronger digital dimension, and also, of course, eco-innovation, which is very important. So coming then on to our last point really is that smart specialization is, we think this is a good idea. We've heard just the last session, I think that it's got a good inward-looking way of strengthening the SWOT analysis, the analysis of what regions are good at, but we particularly like the outside and the external view of placing the regions to getting more information from what other regions are doing. And we think that more support is needed for regions to exchange best practice on processes and methodology. And also, of course, is to start to link regions that are specializing in the same specialisms. This is another opportunity to create more stronger European value chains. So in conclusions, we've always said that regions need innovation and research and innovation needs regions. And all regions need to contribute to the competitiveness of Europe. And regions know their context and they need support to develop competitive innovation ecosystems. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard, for keeping to the time. I hope that there will be many questions about ERRIN, which has been one of the most successful networks at the European level over the last years, and there are certainly very good reasons for that, combining regions and innovation. I also like your slides on stairways, and there will be certainly questions about the stairways, plus the fact that a stairway is not only to go up, but also to go down sometimes, so different type of stairways. So, regions of knowledge is about cooperation between clusters, so I can probably build a bridge, not a stairway, with Reza. Reza will concentrate more on clusters policy, clusters issues, with his own perspective. I give you the floor.
Thank you, Olivier. Good afternoon. First of all, like all my colleagues here, I'd like to thank the WIRE organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share some of the things that we're doing at the Foundation for Clusters and Competitiveness, which is a revitalized independent foundation, and talk about that. So for the next 10 minutes, I have 10 minutes, and I will stick to that. I will talk about the importance of clusters in all the things that we talk about today. We are talking about the smarter specialization. We're talking about outcomes of regions of knowledge, and everything that we do, basically, clusters and cluster firms and cluster management has a real major role to play in that. And then I will talk a little bit about the foundation itself and our aims and goals, and I will leave you with at least one takeaway message on that. So the topic I want to talk about today is cluster management excellence. And I think a lot of you may consider what is the relevance of cluster management to all the things that we talk about here today. And to do that, I would like to almost deconstruct what are the drivers of innovation certainly in the European Union, and then see how each element of that is driven by good cluster management and good attitude from the cluster firms. And to demonstrate that by investing in training and having more trained and motivated cluster managers, we could accelerate this vision of more innovative Europe. And when I talk about cluster, I'd just like to make sure that this clarification is made right at the beginning, that when I talk about clusters for the next 5 or 6 minutes, I am talking generically. Clusters, the name clusters seem to be a bit of a political football, and I think depending on the complexion of the administration, we call it different things. It could be today cluster, tomorrow it's industrial district, the day after it could be local production systems, technology platforms, networks, you name it. So I'm talking about generically where companies and other institutions get together to work together, and how important it is to have the management on that. Just before I start on the main part of it, I just want to go back a few years to when Mr. Eszak-Alfold, who was the former Prime Minister, or he still is former Prime Minister of Finland, he was asked by the European Commission to write a report on how Europe could be a more innovative place. And his report came back with 3 things, mainly, +1. The +1 is finance, which we all know there's always shortage of finance. But 3 things that he talked about were that Europe needs to become a market for new and innovative products, almost to lead, to have lead market. The second thing was we need to focus our resources, whether it is the R&D or innovation or technology resources, we need to focus that. And third thing was that Europe needs to have a more mobile, more easier movement of resources, people, capital, innovation, ideas, intellectual property. So those 3 drivers, I'm going to say why it is important to have, if I can get the, right. No. Just bear with me. Right. So how clusters contribute to lead markets? Clusters and cluster managers are in an excellent place to understand what are the new developments in each market, in each technology area, and how they can contribute to a more innovative Europe. Cluster managers, by definition of where they are at the heart of clusters, and also they sit at the intersection of industries. So they should be able to identify very quickly what are the key enabling technologies and what are the industries of future that could come around out of key enabling technologies. And also they're in a very good position to add services to manufactured goods to make it more productive. The second point he raised as a driver was refocusing R&D resources. Again, cluster firms and cluster management are in an ideal place to identify where are the new areas for research, what are the new development that is needed. They know who the new players in each area are, and therefore they're in a really good place in terms of contributing to smarter specialization strategies in the regions. And finally, clusters, by their definition, being traded type of activities, they will rely on the export of both goods, services, and also investment. There will be inward investment as well as investment in other countries. So I hope by now I've established that they do have an impact on innovation drivers. Why is it important? European Cluster Observatory identifies a large number of clusters right across Europe. They're rating them. I don't know if you ever visited the website, but they identify them with star rating and so on. So we know we have a lot of clusters in Europe. We also know we have a lot of cluster organizations. These are either public or private funded bodies that support clusters. But that is not enough either. What we really need is to develop and engender cluster management excellence and with certainly excellence within clusters in order to reach to where we want in terms of having a more innovative Europe. Right, who are we? Clusters and Competitiveness Foundation is an independent foundation. It was formed nearly 10 years ago, almost 9.5 years ago, and it is really about improving the European competitiveness by promoting and improving cluster management. And we like to see that as a discipline. It is a discipline of management. So if you can go to university or business school and do an MBA, you should be able to do a qualification in cluster management too. And what do? We stand on platforms like this and promote the concept of cluster management as a professional discipline. So there is although cluster management attracts best quality of people, but what is about their career progression and so on. We collaborate with European Cluster Excellence Initiative. Some of you may be familiar with that. And they have developed training courses on a long term to develop trainers who can work with cluster managers. We facilitate training programs for the trainers, not for individual cluster managers, but for trainers to train group of cluster managers. We also award qualification and certification, which we are now currently finalizing in discussion with the European Commission in terms of accreditation of these qualifications. And also we do this on an international basis beyond the borders of the European Union, in Latin America and Middle East, North Africa too. So our ultimate aim is that cluster management to be recognized as a professional management discipline. And my take-home message to policymakers is, as we look for innovation policies across Europe, where the feet is firmly on the ground and the reality, but they're still looking at the skies and stars for aspiration and inspirations, policymakers could really do themselves disservice if they ignore cluster managers as a major input into that decision-making process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Reza, for this plea for a strong clusters management. And beyond the cluster management, the importance of clusters in the innovation ecosystems. So in addition to what we heard before, we need strong European networks, we need clusters, and we will discuss also, and we will challenge, of course, how far we should go in the future with clusters, clusters as means, clusters as, let's say, not the ultimate objective of innovation, but good clusters and good clusters managers to do something. But I will give the floor to Claire, who will be able to bring us a little bit within the Union, but a little bit beyond the Union through her OECD experience, focusing also, if she wishes, a little bit on smart specialization, but there is no obligation, about regional innovation, so your own perspective.
Good afternoon, everybody. What I would like to do in the 10 minutes that I have now is to share some of the lessons learned working with regions in the OECD area and in Europe in terms of developing innovation policies by, for, and in regions. And with this title, I would like to emphasize the fact that policies for innovation in regions can be developed by the regions when they have the potential, the competencies, and the skills to do that. They are also developed for the regions by other levels of authorities, European Union, national authorities, and they are also developed in the regions by the mixes of policies that are present, be they run by the regions or not. So by this title, I would like already to pass the message that policies for innovation in regions should be seen in a broad perspective, in a policy mix perspective. So just very briefly to remind you about the new context for innovation policy, which is nothing really new in concepts, but actually in practice, this is not yet a reality. Traditional policy approach focused on innovation mostly as R&D, so tackled research, technology, high-tech sectors, and R&D producing organizations and companies, public and private, technology transfer organization, and the creation and diffusion of new knowledge. So actually, the view on innovation has changed, as we all know, which has a lot of implication on the policy approach. Policy should tackle innovation not only as R&D in some sectors. For some activities, R&D is important, but we all know that innovation is much wider than that. It's the exploitation in economic terms of new ideas. So this means that the focus has to broaden to include a broader set of activities: marketing, commercial capability, design, organization, and diffuses also and be promoted in all sectors, not only the science-based and high-tech sectors, focusing on companies which are the main innovation drivers. Of course, promoting and supporting knowledge creation and diffusion, but paying much more attention to knowledge absorption. So this creates a completely new context for innovation policy, and still today, innovation policy in the regions or for the regions is a kind of homeless policy in between research and technology policy and economic policy. And despite all the new rhetoric about innovation, what we observe in region is that innovation promotion stands a bit at odds between traditional policy areas. So to my view, the idea of smart specialization strategy is to give a new boost to those strategies that are already there in many of the regions, certainly in Europe, since beginning mid of the 90s, but focusing on the shortcomings that are visible after, I would say, 2 decades of experience in regional innovation policies. What are the main shortcomings or the challenges for those policies? First of all, we observe a high level of fragmentation and duplication of investments for R&D and innovation, not only within regions individually, but also across regions. That results, in many cases, in a lack of critical masses for innovation activities in regions when they are seen as closed entities or are autonomous and autarkic entities. Of course, the question of cooperation between the actors of innovation systems stands at the center, and this needs, of course, to be taken as a core ingredient of the new approaches for policies in and for the regions. One important element that has been singled out already in the presentations before this session is the idea of functional regions. It's the idea that innovation doesn't stop at the administrative borders, and that there are today missed opportunities in cross-border innovation policies. I will not go deep into that because the last speaker will focus his speech in, I guess, a good example of a cross-border innovation policy. But today, the reality is that policies are contained into administrative borders which do not correspond to the reality of innovation practices. Now, one very important challenge that smart specialization strategy are to tackle is the question of defining priorities. This has been also already discussed. Today, the choices are driven by pressure from lobbies, they are determined by the political cycles that are too short compared to the length of innovation and the time dimension needed for innovation policies to bear fruits. And this is manifest by strategic approaches that are quite weak to respond to those challenges. One challenge that lies at the heart also of the smart specialization strategies, and this now focus on the word strategy rather than specialization, is the gap between the policy document, the strategies themselves, the strategic document, and the instruments. And this, of course, is manifested by the inertia of policy mixes that are here today but are the results of past policies and that stand at odds with the strategies of today. So the question is, how do you reshuffle your policy mix in order that it responds to the new strategies? And of course, this all boils down to the question of policy intelligence. Today, one of the main challenges for smart specialization strategies is to address the question of intelligence tools for monitoring, evaluating, and designing policies which are driven and which are fine-tuned according to the outcome of the policy. So, in a nutshell, those are, I would say, the challenges or the current difficulties and shortcomings in regional innovation policies that are to be addressed by smart specialization strategies. Some tend to say that there is nothing new in that is maybe new rhetorics, but or new wine in old bottles or whatever. But I think if this new move, this new drive towards smart specialization strategy tackles specifically those shortcomings, then we are really facing new policies and new challenges. So the key components, I think I would not repeat this because this has been discussed already. The fact that the specialization should not focus on sectors, but on the innovative use of skills, knowledge base that are present in the regions, but that are combined into new activities. The importance of connectivities within the regions, but also with bordering and international regions and partners, and the combination between the bottom-up entrepreneurial discovery process and top-down priority setting by public authorities. Because of the timing, I will not go further into this entrepreneurial discovery process. Very practically, how to design a smart specialization strategy. Actually, I would like to call it S4, smart and sustainable specialization strategy. I think the sustainability is a bit forgotten into this debate. But anyway, let's already look at the S3, its big program as such. Actually, there is no recipe for such a strategy. There are a number of steps, and it can be described like here in 10 steps, 10 ingredients that should be in, and that are very much interlinked. So there is no linear process and step-by-step from start to finish. Actually, this is a very much recursive process. If you start with a vision, if there is a vision for the region, this, of course, influences priorities. This defines the scope and the process of the strategy development or the strategy redesign phase and leads to new analysis. And this analytical part is a very important ingredient for successful smart specialization strategies, because this is going to be the countervailing power against the power of lobbies and will provide the decision tools for the policymakers who have to decide about alternative scenarios. So this fuels a policy intelligence pool or set of tools, including observatories, monitoring indicators, evaluation practices, and so on, which feed in the policy mix, which is the set of policies that are there, but for which normally regional and national policymakers do not have a clear view, a view on the balance, the interactions between all the policies from different policy areas, and most importantly, on the impacts. And this is why the monitoring and evaluation step is really a key step. There is no recipe for a good policy mix for innovation. A policy mix will be good if it proves to be successful through good monitoring and evaluation, which leads then to a review, update, and revision of priorities. So it is very much an ongoing process which has to be revised, refueled by new analysis, new consultations, other types of stakeholders' involvement in order to upgrade and update the strategy. So to sum up, what are, I would say, the key ingredients or the key success factors in order for regions to evolve towards more efficient policies to promote innovation? First of all, those policies should be really region-specific because there is variety in innovation potential. So the idea of smart specialization strategy captures this idea that regions have specific assets within their borders, but also through their capacity to tap into resources that are located outside of their borders. And this leads to tailor-made policies for each region. Second point, important ingredient or important success factors is the openness. And here I would like to use the word in two senses. First of all, in terms of content. Innovation policies touch about all, practically all, or many policy domains. It touches about research, technology transfer, but also economic policy, export policy, foreign direct investment, human resources, and so on. So the barriers should be broken between policy areas, but also between administrative borders, as I mentioned before. Third element, this is the policy mix question. Organizing positive interactions and synergies between the instruments rather than letting instruments coexist with sometimes conflicting or even perverse effects, which means that there is a consultation and interactions between the various bodies in charge of the various policies, which are normally quite fragmented in most of the environment. And the last and most important point is the development of policy intelligence in order to fuel the policies with facts, evidence, to develop evidence-based policies rather than ex-post evidences to justify choices. And also leaving room for policy experimentation, because as I said in the first part of the talk, innovation policy is still very immature and borrows from different, more traditional policies for which there is more knowledge. So policy experimentation in new fields like design for innovation, like public procurement, which we mentioned before, is important, but there is no standardized practice for that. So policy experimentation is important, but of course it has to be coupled with monitoring and evaluation. I think that was the last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, for this additional food for thought, notion of policy intelligence, and I hope that some of you will challenge some processes during the discussion about smart specialization. Where should we go? So with Daria, we will move to the European Institute of Technology. We will know more about business community involvement. We will be knowing more about the knowledge communities. And of course, the burning question will be how far could regions go on this line of KICs and EIT, where sometimes we hear regions who say, well, it's not such an easy process to be involved in the full KICs process. So you have the floor. Thank you. And keep your questions and comments for a little bit later. But we are nearly at the end of our speakers.
Good afternoon. My name is Daria Golebiowska-Tataj, and I'm very glad that you came to Krakow, which is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, and I'm very proud to come here very often. Before I start, let me make sure how can I calibrate my presentation. Would you please put up your hands, those of you who think they know a lot about the EIT? Okay, would you please put up your hands those who think know very little? Okay, so I wanted to know how to calibrate because the EIT has been mentioned a few times today, and I know that this is still a very new concept in Europe and didn't want to make you bored or put obsolete information. The EIT started 4 years ago in 2008 with a mission to become a catalyst and deliver a step change in European innovation capacity and impact. 2008, this was the time when Lehman Brothers became bankrupt, which launched the global financial and later economic crisis. What we put forward as the governing board in terms of strategic framework for the EIT was not very popular. People were not looking favorably at the market solutions, at the free enterprise, at linking innovation with entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial companies, entrepreneurial teams as the only drivers of job creation and value creation in the capitalist economy. So we believed that Europe needed a new agenda, and we put forward a framework which linked research and technology, higher education, and businesses. This is what we call the knowledge triangle. And while this concept was pretty discussed at a time in Europe, the contribution that we believed, or the missing link that we believed was necessary to make this happen was entrepreneurship. And when I say entrepreneurship, and I'm very happy that this word was mentioned earlier today a few times, I do not only mean companies. We first of all mean entrepreneurial people who are able to integrate scarce resources and deliver extraordinary impact under a short period of time. So we think that people who are creative, who are able to be resilient, so fail, learn, and try again, are key for European growth beyond the crisis. The EIT and in its legislation was to be, first of all and foremost, the framework to set up networks called knowledge and innovation communities. We call them KICs, but the acronym doesn't say much, so we'd rather call them innovation factories, a term coined by Alexander von Gabin, the chairman of the EIT board. So what are these innovation factories? Well, they are networks, meaning that they have a galaxy-like structure with very few collocation nodes, 5 or 6. Being part of the KIC it is not a closed process. There's a built-in mechanism to become part of the network. To give you an example, earlier this year, one of the KICs opened its 6th collocation node in Torino. So do not think that KICs, the existent ones, are closed structures. They are open with the entry and exit mechanism at very different levels of a KIC, of an individual partner, but also of setting up a new node. They're highly integrated. We believe that there must be a way to move beyond the loose networking present in the European innovation landscape, where the role of a coordinator is to bring partners together, they get resources, and after a shorter or longer period of time, each of the partners has some benefits, but overall there is no sustainable impact in the long term. We then believe that they must have legal entity. We left them a leeway what kind of legal entity they can establish. So one is a for-profit company. Two others have chosen to be associations. They have their own governing structures, independent. They are private and public partnerships, meaning that universities, public and universities, private companies, research laboratories join as partners in these ventures. A critical difference between a traditional network, European network, and the Innovation Factory is the leadership of the Chief Executive Officer, CEO. We believe that the person who will be leading the network, leading the KIC, has to have an executive power. And by this I mean that this person must have a decision-making power and a budgetary control, not only on the contribution of the EIT, but on the contribution of the overall partnership, of the overall consortium. Because otherwise, we believe there will be no accountability and there will be no results-driven culture within the KIC. Believe me, they are CEOs. The three KICs that we have are led by real chief executive officers. They come from very different backgrounds. One is a former academic, one is an entrepreneur, and one is a former corporate executive. But they all have executive powers in their KICs, and they're all being held accountable for the results. The KIC partners, as I mentioned, are leading European universities. There are different categories of partners depending on a KIC structure. There are leading partners who contribute in cash or in-kind input, and there are partners, affiliate partners, who want to be more loosely associated with a KIC. The first three KICs were started in 2010. One climate KIC deals with the grand challenges related to climate mitigation and climate change mitigation adaptation, the ICT labs with Future Information Communication Society, and KIC in energy with sustainable energy. We are still in a learning curve, us as the EIT and the three KICs. What does it mean to be a catalyst in European innovation policy? This means that there are some failures on our 4-year learning curve. It means that certain things didn't work. It also means that we have a knowledge how to accelerate the process of establishing a new type of partnerships in Europe. Here you see the map of Europe with mapping of the co-location centers. Well, you may say it's highly concentrated in the traditional hotspots of innovation in Europe. Indeed, where the technical and technological and innovation capacity is, Europe should consolidate this and exploit. There is no other way. You may also look that there is an attempt to develop a different model for integrating regions which are less developed, integrating countries which are less developed. Particularly, Climate KIC came up with a novel structure. They call it regional implementation centers. One is in Poland, one is in Hungary, one in Spain, in Italy, and in England. The difference between the co-location center is that a co-location is located, it's a physical presence, it's an office, if you wish, located in a part where already is a significant part of the innovation chain. So it's usually a large industrial cluster, and in that cluster, it's usually a site where a research university is. Big companies have their laboratories. It can be a science park, for example, or it can be a business incubator, or within the campus. We believe that innovation, as we understand, happens by physical interaction, by virtual interaction, very often at the periphery of the networks, but this face-to-face interaction is still important. This is why we thought that there should be a physical network where people can commute, come and work on short-term assignments in different KICs to get exposed to culture, to get discomfortable working with people in different cultures, to learn, to come back, and to have greater ability to lead change in their own places. The Regional Implementation Center is more a partnership where you can take projects developed in the collocation centers and try to implement them large scale, usually in partnership with the local governments. This is just one example of how to smartly use the ability of different regions in Europe to provide value added, how to find synergies. We're very proud that there are early results. If you think about something and if you conceptualize something, put little money into this, bring people together, start a project, and then finally you have real results, real people, young people who start their companies, who feel empowered, who raise finance, who have products and ideas for companies which are born global from day one. It really makes you think that there's something good in what you're doing. So here you have the 3 first awardees of our EIT Entrepreneurship Awards. We understand our mission as bringing a cultural change in Europe, to encourage people to take risks, to encourage people to showcase that they can be resilient. And these young people are, for us, the light towers, the ambassadors, if you wish, of what Europe can do, and how can Europe grow beyond the crisis. There's no other way but with young companies, very often started by people in their midlife. Don't get me wrong that it's the young company means a young student, but people with an entrepreneurial drive. And I very much appreciated a statement earlier today in one of the presentations that if you want regions to develop, you need to focus on entrepreneurial discovery. This is very close to our way of thinking. Entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial ecosystem, and entrepreneurial discovery is where we believe the smart specialization should start. Technology is very important, but probably comes second. So what is the EIT thinking in terms of developing further? Well, each KIC is a transnational innovation network. We believe we're trying to find ways how to scale up the impact we have. Because please mind, people talk about the EIT, but we are a very small project. We were endowed with 308 million euro. For European funding, it's really very limited resources. The entrepreneurial way how to get out of this and bring the impact was to put the framework and the call for the communities in that we fund only up to 25% of KICs budgets. Believe it or not, this is not competitive in terms of what are the framework conditions offered by other programs, but marketplace players found it very attractive. There is a big industrial involvement and big industrial interest in the way KICs work. When you look at the funding coming to the KICs on yearly basis, we see that there is more and more industrial partners joining, and their contribution as a percentage of the total budget increases. Second, the EIT is based in Budapest. We believe that if we can consolidate Budapest team and develop a knowledge pool to share practices and to understand how networks actually work. There's a lot of research going on, but we still do not understand how in the network economy, in the network society, the innovation networks bring value, and how to capture this value so that innovation is not only a cost for us, but becomes an investment and creates jobs and growth. We very much focus on entrepreneurship education. KICs have a very strong component of technology, and majority of our students are engineers or scientists, we want them to be business literate. We want them to understand how markets work, how to manage people, how to lead change, what is a balance sheet. So this entrepreneurial education toolbox is a component of every EIT label diploma. It also brings change. People at the university, some of them enter and know that they will start companies, and they will do it whether we help them or not. There are people who will never become entrepreneurs, but the vast majority of students simply do not consider this as a career option. And when we look at the world around us, one way, sooner or later, they may have no other choice. So we want them to be equipped for the future with this basic entrepreneurial skills and knowledge. Education is one of the cross-KIC agenda. The EIT diploma, label diploma, is what we give to the programs delivered by the KICs. Entrepreneurship is another cross-KIC lever. Here I mentioned the EIT Entrepreneurship Award. The annual EIT Roundtable of Top Entrepreneurs will be an event to bring the awareness and change the culture, showing people who are resilient and who made it. Again, by entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, we also understand academics and corporate executives or social leaders in terms of social entrepreneurship who managed to change their projects into scalable and impact-driven. And finally, the world-class innovation, technology, science. While EIT is not about the investment into the basic science, we still believe it is important. We focus on the applied science, though, and the link to the market, and want to be competitive and choose the future themes and calibrate them in the way so that they are sounding with the needs of the industry and entrepreneurs. There will be a next call for KIC under the new financial framework. Considered themes are human life and health, human learning and learning environments, food for future, manufacturing by and for creative human beings, security and safety, mobility and smart cities. This is the proposal, and the Parliament and the Council will approve the final 6 themes and probably word them maybe in a different way. There will be 2 waves of KICs. In 2014, first 3 themes will be chosen, and in 2018, the next 3. The EIT is part of the Horizon 2020. It's part of the common framework, but and it's also part of the European higher research and higher education area. What is important is that it is to be an experiment. This is why it has substantial freedom in designing how to implement its mission. For us, it's critical to understand how, with the new innovation policy, we can leverage the impact and the learning that we have. Well, the questions will follow. Some interesting points would be that, first, the EIT and the KICs have gathered tacit knowledge on how to develop new sort of partnerships, and there should be a way to share this knowledge and to help incubate new KICs, new consortia. The second thing is how to build the entrepreneurial ecosystems from day one, either within or by university or by industry or by other players in the innovation networks. And third thing would be how to mobilize industry, how to bring them into more involvement, financial and non-financial, into the innovation networks. Thank you very much, and I will be looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Daria. So it was all what you wanted to know about the EIT and the KICs. And my own hope is that we will not bring too much complexity in the future. Smart cities, for instance, is a typical case. Everybody likes smart cities, but let's try to build the future regional ecosystems in an easygoing way. But anyway, the budget, the increasing budget within Horizon 2020 as such is the first incentive for getting a lot of interest from the regional players. So let's also keep it for challenging. And I will give the floor to Cedric, so I do not know how I will build the bridge between you and Alsace, maybe triple helix, quadruple helix, different type of helix, that is to say, working together over the borders. So in your case, the Upper Rhine experience is a very interesting one. And let's keep, after that, time for discussion.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for this introduction. So I'm very pleased to present you today how Alsace and Upper Rhine fosters research and innovation projects in a cross-border context. To start, just a few words about the Bureau Alsace. So we are the representation to the European Union of the Alsatian public bodies and consular chambers. We are representing 9 partners to the EU. So the Alsatian region, the 2 county councils, the 3 biggest towns, Strasbourg, the seat of the European Parliament, Colmar and Mulhouse, and the chambers of commerce and industry, the regional chambers of agriculture, and the chamber of handicrafts. Our mission, our lobbying, monitoring EU policy, announcing EU projects, especially in the field of research, innovation, energy, and sustainable development, but also training and hosting delegation, and the most important one may be coordinating the European affairs, strategy, and activities of our partners. My presentation is organized in three parts. The first one, I will give you a short overview of Alsace and Upper Rhine R&D ecosystem. Then we made a focus on 3 cross-border cluster cooperation. And at the end, I will present you some projects and tools that we implement in Upper Rhine in order to respond to the Innovation Union and Europe 2020. So Alsace, as you can see on the map, we are more or less, as a lot of regions at the head of European Union. We are the small region in orange on the map, and we are sharing borders with Germany and Switzerland. So we have the smallest French region, and we have also another particularity because we are the only French region which managing ERDF. So the amount of ERDF for Alsace is about 75 million euro, which 33 million is focused on research and innovation. I mentioned that also we have clusters, but clusters, in France, we have Pôle de Competitivité. That was a label created by the French state. It's some kinds of top-class clusters and was given to some special clusters in France, and we count 5 in Alsace and Upper Rhine. On this slide, you will see how we designed the regional innovation strategy, because that was an important thing to prepare the futures for Alsace and Upper Rhine. And you will see that at the start of our reflection, we put cross-border cooperation at the heart. So we organize it through 3 convergences. The first one is green economy, so including topics such as new economy, environment, housing, mobility, and energy. The second one is health and wellness, with food, biodiversity, health technology, e-health, ICT, medical device. And the last one, I think, is really special for the Upper Rhine, is that we call humanisme rhénan, so humanism, and we focused on the creative cultural industries, social innovation, and administration and management. So, of course, we are involved of the setting up of a smart specialization strategy for Alsace and for Upper Rhine. So we joined the platform a few months ago, and we start our work to set up and to design this new strategy, of course, of the 3 conventions, and we are now making an audit of that we made successfully, and also the barrier that we face in the implementation of the strategy. That's also a very interesting map, because some months ago in France, the state launched something that we call the Grand Emprunt, big loan, that we can translate in English. And a lot of regions and clusters was competing. And again, we put cross-border cooperation at the heart of this strategy. And that was successful for us because we were chosen with Paris and Bordeaux, and of course to implement strategy and set up topics like biotechnology, nanotechnology, and bioinformatics. So we can say that Alsace and Upper Rhine is, for Alsace, for French part of the first French Hill Science campus outside Paris. Now, some key figures about Upper Rhine. As I said, Alsace is a small region, and to get the critical masses to exist of the European map, you have to work with other regions. So we naturally look on the other side of the borders, and since 2006, with the west part of Baden-Württemberg, the south part of Rhineland-Palatinate, and the north part, the 5 cantons of northwest Switzerland, we decided to work closely together to create the Upper Rhine metropolitan region. There was obviously launched 1 year ago, and we have 6 million inhabitants. The GDP is about 203 billion euro, so it's something quite nice in Europe. And the main cities are Strasbourg, Colmar, so that I said, Karlsruhe with the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and Freiburg, one of the most greenest cities of Europe. In the Upper Rhine, we could also 167 universities, schools, and research institutes, and more or less 170,000 students. You can already see that we count an average of 600 clusters and enterprise network. That's quite a lot for finally not so big territory. Then on the map, you will see that usually the maps stop at the borders, but we set up tools that we can allow us to create cross-border maps. That's very useful to plan spatial planning, for example, but also to see what the neighbors are doing. So we can coordinate the action and create better synergy. So on this map, it's very small, but you can see at home that we have a lot of infrastructures of research development, a lot of agency, and they work very closely together. I made also some focus on the key R&D topics in Alsace and Upper Rhine. So, of course, vehicle of the futures, chemistry, materials, biology, life sciences, and lasers. Now I will speak about clusters. So, as I said, we have 5 pôles de compétitivité, but I will just focus on 3. The first one is maybe the well-known Alsace BioValley. Okay, is dealing with biotechnology and therapeutic innovation. And one thing is very important also is that Alsace BioValley is the coordinator of BioValley, the network, one of the largest life science clusters in Europe, because it includes German partners and Swiss partners. And this network was created with Interreg for AI Upper Rhine program, and then is ongoing with a nice project. And I spoke about critical masses. You can see that 40% of the biggest pharma companies are located in this area, and France, Germany, and Switzerland rank among the top 5 for the production of medication. So that's obviously a strong asset for us. The second one is the cluster vehicle of the futures. So this one is focused on solving mobility problems with a view to achieve sustainable development. It was setting up only in 2005, so it's quite young, but it had also developed more than 90 projects funded about 253 million euros. And between the projects, we can count 18 European projects and 2 region of knowledge programs. But I will make a focus a little bit later. And currently, the clusters concentrated its activities on 2 new dimensions, urban and peri-urban vehicles, and mobility, in order to minimize the environmental impact in the city. The last one is a newborn, because Trion is Trion National Energy Network in the Upper Rhine. It starts with, again, an Interreg for a Upper Rhine project, and it aims to deal with energy topics in the Upper Rhine. It has 5 activities: build competence database, organize 2 national events on energy in the Upper Rhine, organize training for SMEs about energy policy and energy issue. Key data energy for ERRIN, so cross-border, of course, and cross-border advice for SMEs and laboratories. So that activity is nice, but without product it doesn't work. So I'll start. The 5 concrete project was born. The first one is about certification, because it's a small area, but we have 3 norms about energy efficiency: F-energy for France, Minergie for Switzerland, and Passive Hour for Germany. So the first topic is to get maybe an European label for all these kind of topics. The second one is database, as I said. Of course, cross-border technical visit for energy efficiency, market study, because that's very important, and technology monitoring in the public building sectors. So now I think we are approaching the most important part of my presentation, projects and the tools. I will start with the tools that we already mentioned today, the ERRIN. For us, a real tool that combines the emergence of research and development project and territorial development in the Upper Rhine. We count 3 ERRINs in which participate Alsace. The first one is called LIDERA, and dealing with lead market initiative. The second one is CrossTextNet, more focused on material textile. And the last one is Eurotransbio, of course, of biotechnologies. And again, one particularity of this ERRIN, there is involved region. That's not the same, that's not the case for many ERRINs. So we hope that in the next program period, we can continue to use these tools, because it's very efficient. So now I will speak to you about ABC Europe, interclustering between biotechnology clusters in Europe. So BioValley is participating in, it's financed by Europe INNOVA program, and it aims to put together the most important biotechnology clusters in order to strengthen the partnership between the EU communities, to get more stronger worldwide, because, as we said this morning, competition is not only in Europe, but also in India, Brazil, America, Japan, and Korea. To intensify support for result-oriented of transnational cooperation. Of course, to create more effective service for biotech companies, and to extend the international dimension of biocluster cooperation. And the second one is more local, as said, but very useful, because cross-border cooperation, it works if there exist some tools to make it work. And BioValley decided to design one of the tools with the Meet and Match project. Now, if we have nice SMEs in Germany and good laboratories in Alsace, but if they then want to, they don't know each other and don't work together, that doesn't work. So BioValley organized in one day some kind of speed dating for clusters between SMEs and laboratories, and that's working very well, because you can find what you need in the same territory. And there's really good project involved in. So the main objective, as I said, is the identification of academic and or industrial partners and products, to have a complete overview of the economic side of the BioValley region, and to promote the economic strength of the BioValley region, and represent the academic and the companies at European level. So that's one project of region of knowledge led by the cluster vehicle of the futures. But I will make a focus on another one, because we have the chance to have the Elmos project here in Krakow. Just have a look at the stand downstairs. It's very interesting. The people managing the project are in the room, so I can speak for the project much better than me. The main objective is to delivering concept for a better exchange of electromobility knowledge at regional and European level. And the partners, we have Switzerland, we have Germany, we have Hungary, we have France with Vehicle the Future, and Austria. And now I think we have tools that exist and we can use it because European Union provided to us, but sometimes we have to be innovative and create tools. And that's, I think, a good example, because the last October, the Upper Metropolitan Region launched that we call the offensive science. the first national instrument designed to support R&D projects. So it's a kind of funds of funds, combining Interreg for E funds, so ERDF, and regional funding, with participation of Alsace, the land of Baden-Württemberg, and the land of Rhineland-Palatinate. So the aim of the project is to finance and implement high-level R&D cross-border projects. Some key figure about the first call. So we get about 50 project IDs, but only 36 was submitted, and 29 was eligible. That's quite big for the first call. Finally, the budget was around 10 million euro, including 4.7 million ERDF and 1.6 million from regional partners. The evaluation was made by peer review with an expert coming from the Upper Rhine, and we're addressing a wide range of topics such as governance, culture, history, ICT, biotechnology, geoscience, photonics. And finally, we decided to find 7 flagship projects, donc 4 in life sciences, 2 in energy, and 1 in culture and history. I'm coming to my conclusion with 4 points, maybe 5-1. So the first one is that the regional dimension of research and innovation must be taken into account by the European Commission, especially in the Horizon 2020 program. The second one is that innovative region must be able to use all the opportunity given by the EC. And in this case, I hope that I show you that Upper Rhine and Alsace did it with ERDF funds, with FP7 funds, with CIP funds. Of course, innovative regions have to design new tools to boost research and innovation projects. So I hope that the Offers in Science convince you. And then, of course, we are coming to the smart specialization strategy, and we have to be a leader in setting up this kind of strategy in order to help the other region and to create better synergy between regions to make Europe more competitive and stronger. And the last point, I'm sure that the European Commission will find a way to create some kind of new region for knowledge in order to let the region express all their research and innovation potential. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Cedric. I'm happy that this session ends with a very practical presentation of something which is happening now. So not only the future, but really the present.